how the story came to be, this happened in October 2010, and in 2000, I think it was 2017, I was doing research for a book I was writing that was really focused on the presidential range of New Hampshire, in particular the northern presidentials. And so I was reaching out to contacts, and I was talking to someone from New Hampshire Fish and Game, because I was trying to get some background on the range, particularly in all of the seasons, but really focused on winter. And the Fish and Game officer said, wow, you should really talk to Pam Bales from PEMI Search and Rescue. Very well respected, but somebody, as you can tell, who has just a tremendous passion and draw into the mountains and has spent thousands and thousands of hours on the range itself. And so I was able to get her contact information, told her who I was. We sat down at a coffee shop near her home and met for coffee. And I was just asking her, about the terrain and the nuances and how does the snow drift, in Sphinx Call, in other areas, and because she had just spent so much time there. And we started talking about experiences that she had had on the range, and she had had a number, as you can probably imagine. And one of the things that Pam is known for, but it's not widely known, is that she had done the full presidential traverse once a month for 72 consecutive months, which is an amazing streak. And during that time, at one point, she donated a kidney to her sister. And so she did a traverse, kidney donation, recovered, and was still able to keep that monthly streaks going. So that just tells you how resilient she is. But we were talking, and she brought up a couple of experiences that she had up there, and she mentioned this one time that she had encountered a distressed hiker up in the area of Mount Clay off of Gulfside. And such an incredibly humble person really tried to move beyond that to the next story. And I said, well, can we go back to that and just talk about that a little bit? And I went back to my notes the other day knowing I was talking to groups about this, and there's 2 pages of terrain-ish notes, and then there's about 10 pages of Pam and John. And then there's a few more pages of terrain. But I was really drawn to this and just spent a couple of sessions talking to her about it, because I thought this was such an amazing story that had never been shared before. The week that Pam effected this rescue, she attended a North Country Public Safety Foundation annual dinner. As a member of Search and Rescue, she went. The president of the team said, hey, we have an extra seat for you. Why don't you go to the dinner? And Pam went, and there's a lot of awards that are given out over the course of several hours. And the president of the team, who was also the president of this foundation, had Pam stand up and be recognized for saving the life of a distressed hiker the week before. John's letter had not been received by the president of the team at that moment. It wasn't until days later that he received the letter from John and a small cash donation to the PEMI team. So I started to do it. I'm in the midst of doing research for the book. I start doing a lot of research on Pam's story. I start writing Pam's story. My editor's like, wait, you're writing you go back to the book, leave that. That's a great essay for later. But I essentially finished it because I was just so inspired by the story. I submitted it to Appalachia Journal, which is the Journal of Mountaineering published by the Appalachian Mountain Club. It was in summer, fall of 2018, and at that time, Appalachia was only in print. And so the subscribers read it. That's where it ended. And after my first book came out, our statewide newspaper did a review on the book, and the editor said, hey, would you be interested in writing an occasional column about the climbing scene in New Hampshire? I said, sure. Wrote a couple of columns, hit some writer's block, and I didn't have an article to send them, and my wife said, hey, you should send the essay. And I said, but it's 5,000 words, they're not going to want it. But I did it anyway. And I sent it to them, and the editor said, look, we're going to take a look at this. We're probably going to cut it way down, but we'll consider running it. And they called me a couple of days later and said, look, we're going to run this whole thing. It's never been told before. And the paper allotted space for this 5,000-word piece. At the same time, they posted it on their Facebook page, and that's when it went viral. And at this point, I read the other day, it's had 526,000 reads. But in the midst of it going viral, it ended up on somehow crossing the desk of a screenwriter in California who you saw, he was one of the 2 hikers in the parking lot at the very beginning of the movie. So he's in there, Josh Rollins. And he got in touch with me, said, I really want to write a screenplay on this and try to pitch it. I said, well, I'm not doing anything unless Pam's supportive and involved. And so essentially, I got in touch with Pam. And then basically from there, it was Pam talking with the screenwriter, and then ultimately after the screenwriter pitched the film, and it was picked up by Maven Studios, which you saw in the beginning, then Pam started working with Naomi, and there it is.
So for anyone who hasn't read the article, definitely go read it and compare afterwards. But the ending of the article is quite different from the ending of the movie. So in the movie, you just saw John meet Pam. But in the ending of the article, which your last paragraph also is just really beautiful, there's a philosophy behind what you did, but if you want to explain that a little bit too.
Yeah, so thanks for listening to the 15-minute explanation about it. And so no one knows who John is, and he never came forward. He sent the letter signed John, which I have a copy of, and again made that small donation. And when I closed the essay, the point I really was trying to make is that it doesn't matter. We don't have to identify John because John could be in this room right now. This is really, to me, this is more, and the original title of the essay for Appalachia was Emotional Rescue, because I think this was as much an emotional rescue of John and Pam than it was of a physical rescue of John. And so that's how that came to be. But what the point I close with in the essay is that John could be me, he could be here, he could be your neighbor, he could be a member of your family, because we're all susceptible to storms, right? Metaphorically, we're all susceptible to those things happening in our lives that take all hope away, and we don't know what to do or where to go or who to lean on. And so that's the message I was trying to send. And I didn't try to find him. People asked me if I did, and again, because of all the reasons I just told you.
So we'd love to just open it up to the room. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people here have traversed the presidentials and are probably asking why wasn't it shot in the presidentials, because there would have been so much familiarity, and you obviously had to go to Slovakia.
I don't know what led to that decision. What I will say is I think for many people in this room, Mount Washington is iconic. And for me, it has a special place in my heart, as I think it does for many people here and who are not here. I would have loved to have seen even an opening scene with the state park and the observatory and the COG and the auto road. But I don't know the reasoning behind why. I don't know if maybe at that time pandemic restrictions may have been less in Slovenia, or what the issues were there, but I can't really answer that. But I hear what you're saying. Yes?
Went on to say that she had raised 4 children. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so Pam did lose 2 young children to a carbon monoxide poisoning home accident when she was much younger. She did go on to have 4 children after that, adult children, and actually 2 of them, I believe, are with her tonight at the premiere in New York City. So,
how old was she when she saved John?
I think 2010. I'm so bad at math, and I have to do it in front of a lot of people. I'm going to say in the 50s. Thank you. 50s, early 50s.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
There was one scene in the movie when Pam was in some store or whatever, and the guy was saying, "Don't go up there, you know, really bad weather or something." And she said, "Well, you know what day it is." And I thought at the time that was an anniversary of something, and I just wondered if connecting the dots, John was on the top on the anniversary, on his anniversary, and she was going up on the same anniversary for her.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. So John never spoke of why he was up there other than the letter. He was there to obviously to take his life. Pam, when I talked to Pam, Pam it had been too long since she had been in the mountains, and the weather there had been a streak of bad weather that October that were keeping her out of the mountains, and she was just really needing to go and knew the weather wasn't going to be great. You know, packed for heavy and slow, brought the extra gear, but just really made the commitment, I'm going. Left her itinerary with 2 separate people that day, as she always does. But I think what you're seeing here is some creative license with the anniversaries for both of them. That's really wasn't, that didn't happen.
Speaking of what did and didn't happen too, there's a lot of sort of dramatic scenes in the middle of her trek up the mountain and down the mountain, and I'm wondering how much of those are...
So what you saw when Pam encountered John and went through that triage and treatment is, I would say that's accurate. And then the walk down was accurate. There was no terrain trap falling into the hole or the river. John didn't jump off of anything. There was, I would call it passive resistance from John during this long descent off of the mountain. That really, I think there was one time when he sat down in the snow and said, "I'm not going any further," and she had to encourage him to get up, and was quite firm. But that active resistance that you see in the movie wasn't part of the experience. And I'm not criticizing what's happening because they're 2 separate things. Yeah.
I was just wondering, the details of the letter that John left with Appalachia Club, was that true to the story that was told here at the end where they met and he was kind of saying, "Here's my story"?
No, they've never met.
Well, I know they
yep,
never met, but
yep.
yeah, like what he said in the movie, is that what was detailed in the letter?
No.
No.
No. He was just kind of staring into that abyss and emotionally and couldn't get himself out, went up there to escape it, and but had a renewed sense of life after this, and was seeking employment, was getting housing, was getting help, and that was really the details of the letter. And the letter, if you go online and read the story, the full letter, I put the full letter there in text, so you can read it. Yep. Yes.
When she went up, she wasn't looking for him. She just went up and found him.
Right. So at the time, when Pam was going across Gulfside, her original plan that day was to ascend Jewel Trail, Gulfside to Mount Washington, down to Lakes of the Cloud Hut, and then descend Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail, so a loop. Had set a bailout point of West Side Trail, which is the lower slope. It's below the summit of Mount Washington, westerly facing slope. Got up above tree line onto Gulfside near Mount Clay, and actually had decided, I'm going to bail out. I'm not going to summit Mount Washington, but I'm not going to turn around either. I'm just going to go over to West Side Trail and keep going. And that's when she started picking up the sneaker prints right around after breaking tree line out of the Jewel Trail. And but they really caught her attention near Mount Clay and Gulfside, and when she saw them veering off toward Great Gulf, she knew that it was a problem. Yes?
It's unclear in the movie how the story got told and got put on the news and everything. Did she tell people? Or did it come from John? Or how did it get out to the public world?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, the night of the rescue, Pam got home, and I have the email. There was a flurry of email exchange between Pam and members of the Pemmy Valley Search and Rescue Team sharing the story. Again, Pam had no idea why he was up there, just saying like, look, I really leaned on my training. Here's what worked in this rescue situation. Here's what didn't work. You know, debriefing it kind of with her colleagues. It's a really close-knit team, as all of the teams in New Hampshire are. There was this very brief recognition 4 or 5 days later at this dinner, but it never came to light publicly. It just, the teams are so humble and don't talk about what they do. And so this was just, it was, I'm not gonna say it was another rescue, but it was, they don't promote. They don't say, hey, here's what we did this weekend for rescue situations. And so it just kind of got lost in the wind, for lack of a better term. And it wasn't until I was interviewing her 7 years later that she shared it in her humble way, and that is when it became public.
Okay, thank you.
After I wrote the essay. Yep. Yes.
Just curious about how Pam describes did John truly run to his car? Like, is that how she explained the ending of their story?
Yeah, so they got into the parking lot, and Pam took his wet clothing and put it on the dash of her car and started her car and was heating it up. She gave it back to John, and then I think Pam was putting some things away or what have you. John took the clothes, still had the clothes on that Pam gave him, and then went to his car and he drove off. And she, I'm not going to repeat what she said, but you can imagine some of the colorful language you heard earlier. So, yeah.
Yeah, given that you were talking about Pam being so humble, what did she think about a movie being made out of the story?
Pam was in New York City last night for a premiere, and is there tonight for premiere. And I think Pam's embracing it. I talked to her this morning, but also would very much like to be back out on the trails out west. And but I think she has arrived at this place where is a little embarrassed about all the attention, but also sees the value in the message getting to a larger group, especially right now. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Was it accurate that when somebody's, I don't know if he was technically frostbitten or whatever, but to take all his clothes off, that just didn't make any sense to me. I mean, why, is it because they were wet and so she had to take them off and put other clothes on him?
Yeah, his clothes, when she found him, they were frozen. His clothes, he had shorts on, just a really thin windbreaker and sneakers, and that was all frozen because there was this frozen fog going on at the time. It was completely socked in. That last picture, second to last picture you saw at the end, she actually took up on the ridge that day, and you can just see all that opaque kind of ping pong ball colored sky behind her. But it was frost, so you got to get that off of the skin and replace it with warmer clothing and insulation.
Hard to believe he didn't have permanent damage to his feet.
Yeah, and I think that's the big unknown as to whether there was that frostbite or anything like that. She did such a fantastic job just treating him. And the winds at the time, you're talking 60 plus miles an hour, and then the visibility just continuing to drop. It's just pretty amazing what she was able to do.
Another question right in here.
Yeah.
As she was coming down the mountain, was there any point in that trip when she might have said to herself, it's either me or him? Do I make a decision now that I can't save us both, let's say?
Yeah, a me or him decision if it got to that. And I talked to Pam a lot about that because there was that tension there when she was trying to get him to rewarmed enough to get up and move, that there's this rule within search and rescue that you don't create a second emergency. And she was weighing that decision, like, I'm going to stay with this as long as I possibly can, but I also can't I can't create a second emergency for my teammates and put myself in jeopardy. And rescuer safety in the White Mountains it's paramount. I mean, they put that before, when they're going out on missions, it's the safety of the rescuer first. And that was certainly going through her mind, but she was able to get him warm enough to get him up and following her. Yep.
Where she left her trail and all that, why didn't anybody go look for her when she never got back? Like, you know, like after 5 o'clock or whatever. Don't they check in with one another or whatever? I thought that was weird that nobody really went searching for her.
Well, I think the people that she left the itinerary with know that
She'd be fine.
yeah, and she could go for long periods of time. And I actually don't think she gave a time down. I think she said, this is just where I'm going, because for Pam, she would just get up there and she could go, you know, she could spend just a lot more time than what other people might. So there wasn't, yeah. But she got home that night and sent emails out and let the two people know that she was back. And here's what happened to me. Yeah.
Did you say it was October?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it was full on winter up top. I mean, it's, as anyone knows that's been up there, it can sleet in July, so, yeah.
I just have a quick question about the title too, Infinite Storm. I mean, when you start watching the movie, you think you're going to see a movie where they get stuck up at the top of the mountain because there's an infinite storm. And when you discover what the title actually means, it's quite beautiful. And I think it relates to also and this is a question I have for you too, as someone who's done some work in search and rescue, but how frequent is it? I think, you know, people often take to the hills and enjoy hiking in a crazy way because it can really connect you to something larger than yourself. And I wonder about that relationship between beauty and grief, and how often in search and rescue you find that you have to perform a rescue for someone because of something that's happened where someone's slipped up, or how often this kind of thing happens where someone has actually gone up on a mountain and
Yeah, so the team that Pam was formerly on at this point, I think they do around 30 or so calls a year, which most of the teams do, which saves thousands of hours of extra time for New Hampshire Fish and Game. New Hampshire Fish and Game, there's a really unique setup in New Hampshire where volunteer teams that augment New Hampshire Fish and Game Advanced Search and Rescue Team. And I will tell you that there are incidents of like John's where it's the person actually does pass, and they go up there. It doesn't get publicized because these are very personal, private matters, but it happens. It does happen.
Are there other questions?
The Infinite Storm, was that actually her words, or was that something that came later?
That came later. I think that was from the, I don't know who developed the title, but it wasn't part of the actual situation.
There's another one in the back too.
Yep.
When Pam found John, did she describe whether they went down like the Crawford path, or did she go back the way that she came?
They went back. That's where she went. They went back Gulf Side to Jewel Trail and descended Jewel Trail.
On the topic of disasters up there, you should plug your books about the last verse and whatnot, because it's really very enlightening what happens up there and what these people are capable of doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm here to. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We offered him that opportunity.
I wanted to keep the focus on mental health and that connection and the important. And I didn't want to talk books, or I'll answer questions about the books. I just wasn't going to come here to promote them. So, yep.
Oh, I'm a little confused about the book and the article. I'd like to know what paper it was published in, but can you sort of distinguish between the two? Because I was just reading what the movie was based on. It says it was based on the article.
Yep.
So can you start?
You Googled me?
that?
Flattered, no. All right, so the article, which was, I refer to as the essay because that's what it was submitted as, you may have seen as Footprints in the Snow. That's the name of the article.
Okay.
And that's what the movie's based on. There are 2 books that are about separate incidents in the White Mountains, unrelated to this.
Okay.
But Pam's team was involved in one of the books. So that just tells you how frequently and how close knit those teams are, particularly in the North Country.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more, if there are more questions.
I don't know if this is a question. I mean, it is a question, but I don't know if it's actually. Did she start doing this because she lost her 2 kids, and by rescuing people, she feels like she is rescuing, you know, like she couldn't rescue her children, but now I'm feeling like I'm healing by rescuing people?
I honestly can't answer that question. All I can tell you is there's that rescuer ethos in Pam as a nurse, and I think taking that and then her passion for the mountains and hiking and kind of bringing those 2 things together, and those teams are volunteer, and I think that really just aligned with Pam's values, and but I can't tell you whether that connects back to her earlier trauma. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will, when I talk to her, I will mention that, though.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. It's good in today's world to have a good story that's nice and warm and has some, value on human life and people and stuff like that. I'd just like to say thank you for what you did.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming so much.